My name is Sofia Rodriguez, and I thought I knew my sister-in-law pretty well after 5 years of marriage to her brother. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The evening started innocently enough. My husband Marcus and I had driven over to his sister Victoria's house for our monthly family dinner. Victoria lived in this pristine suburban home with her husband Derek. You know the type. Perfectly manicured lawn, matching outdoor furniture, the works. She'd always been the successful one in the family, running her own consulting business while I struggled to keep my small bakery afloat. As we walked up to their front door, Marcus squeezed my hand. "Try to relax tonight, babe. I know Victoria can be intense sometimes." Intense was putting it mildly. Victoria had this way of making subtle digs that cut deep while maintaining that sweet smile of hers. Tonight felt different, though. There was something in her eyes when she opened the door, a gleam that made my skin crawl. "Sophia! Marcus! Come in, come in!" She air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming. "I've got the most amazing news to share with everyone tonight." The dining room was set perfectly, of course. Expensive china, crystal glasses, cloth napkins folded into little swans. Victoria's mother-in-law, Mrs. Patterson, was already seated, along with Derek and their teenage son Brandon. Everyone looked up expectantly as we took our seats. Victoria practically bounced as she served the main course, some elaborate beef dish that probably cost more than I made in a week. "So," she began, her voice dripping with false excitement, "I have the most incredible announcement." She paused dramatically, making sure all eyes were on her. "I've been selected to consult for a major federal contract. We're talking 7 figures. Here, people!" The table erupted in congratulations. Mrs. Patterson clasped her hands together. Derek beamed with pride, and even Brandon looked up from his phone. Marcus smiled genuinely and raised his glass. "That's fantastic, Vic. Congratulations." But Victoria wasn't done. Her eyes found mine across the table, and that gleam I'd noticed earlier intensified. The best part is, they specifically sought me out because of my expertise in identifying, shall we say, irregular business practices. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Something cold twisted in my stomach. "Oh, you should see some of the cases I've been reviewing," she continued, her voice taking on a mock-serious tone. "Small businesses that think they can cut corners on taxes, underreport income, pay employees under the table." She let out a little laugh. "It's amazing what people think they can get away with." The room went quiet. Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me, and I felt heat rising to my cheeks. Victoria was staring directly at me now, not even trying to hide her smirk. "I mean, take small bakeries, for example," she went on, twirling her wine glass. "Such easy targets for this kind of fraud. Cash businesses, you know? So tempting to skim a little off the top here and there." My hands started shaking. 3 years ago, when my bakery was struggling to survive, I had paid my part-time helper Maria in cash for a few months. It wasn't malicious. I was drowning in paperwork and barely keeping the lights on. But I knew it wasn't exactly by the book. "Victoria," Marcus said carefully, "what are you getting at?" She laughed, but it sounded like broken glass. "Oh, nothing. Specific. I'm just saying it's fascinating how the federal government is really cracking down on these things now. They have all these sophisticated methods for tracking financial irregularities. Small business owners think they're invisible, but..." She shrugged. "Nobody's invisible to the IRS." Mrs. Patterson looked confused. "Why are we talking about taxes at dinner, dear?" "Because," Victoria said, leaning forward with theatrical intensity, "I think it's important that everyone at this table understands the consequences of financial dishonesty. Don't you agree, Sophia?" All eyes turned to me. My mouth went dry, and I felt like I was drowning. The room seemed to spin slightly, and I gripped the edge of the table. I don't know what you're implying," I managed to whisper. Victoria's smile widened. Oh, I'm not implying anything. I'm just sharing some interesting insights from my new federal consulting work. For instance, did you know that the statute of limitations on tax fraud is 6 years? And that whistleblower reports can trigger audits even for seemingly minor infractions? The word whistleblower hit me like a physical blow. My vision blurred, and I felt Marcus's hand on my arm steadying me. Seriously, Victoria, what the hell is this about? Marcus's voice was sharp now. Language, Marcus, Mrs. Patterson scolded, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. Victoria set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. I'm just saying that honesty is the best policy, and that some people at this table might want to consider getting their affairs in order before certain federal agencies come knocking. The blood drained from my face. She knew. Somehow Victoria knew about those cash payments to Maria. But how? And why was she doing this to me in front of the whole family? You're scaring Sophia, Derek said quietly, but Victoria waved him off. Oh, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm trying to help. Her voice rose slightly, and I could hear the whine. Talking now. See, the beautiful thing about my new position is that I have access to all sorts of databases. Background checks, financial records, business filings. She leaned back in her chair, looking supremely satisfied with herself. That's when it hit me. Victoria had run a background check on me. She'd used her new federal access to dig into my personal finances, probably looking for dirt she could use against me. The violation felt like a physical assault. You investigated me, I said, my voice barely audible. I prefer the term due diligence, Victoria replied smoothly. Family is family, but business is business. And when someone in the family might be engaging in questionable practices. Stop. Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. Stop right now, Victoria. But she was on a roll now, drunk on power and wine. The interesting thing is, once you know what to look for, the patterns become so obvious. Cash transactions, underreported income, employees paid off the books. Each word was like a dagger. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. Oh, don't leave, Victoria called after me, her voice mockingly sweet. We haven't even gotten to dessert yet. I stumbled toward the front door, Marcus close behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't work the doorknob. Sophia, wait, Marcus said, reaching around me to open the door. Don't let her get to you like this. But it was too late. The damage was done. Victoria had humiliated me in front of the entire family, threatened me with federal investigation, and violated my privacy in the most horrific way possible. And she'd done it all with that cold, calculated smile. We stepped out onto the front porch, and I finally broke down. The tears came in ugly, choking sobs that shook my whole body. Marcus wrapped his arms around me, but even his warmth couldn't chase away the ice-cold fear that had settled in my chest. She can't do this, I whispered against his shoulder. She can't use government access to investigate family members. That has to be illegal. It is illegal, Marcus said grimly. What she just described is a massive abuse of federal authority. She could go to prison for that. A new thought struck me, one that made my blood run cold. Marcus, what if she's already reported me? What if federal agents are already building a case? Before he could answer, we heard footsteps on the walkway behind us. I turned, expecting to see Victoria coming to deliver another cruel blow. Instead, I saw a man in a dark suit walking purposefully toward the house. He was tall, maybe 45, with graying temples and the kind of serious expression that screamed federal law enforcement. In his hand was a leather portfolio, and pinned to his jacket was a badge that caught the porch light. My heart stopped completely. The man approached us with measured steps, his eyes scanning the house number to confirm the address. When his gaze fell on Marcus and me, huddled together on the porch, his expression softened slightly. "Good evening," he said in a calm, professional voice. "I'm looking for Victoria Patterson. I'm Agent Williams with the Office of Inspector General." The world tilted again, but this time in a completely different direction. Marcus and I exchanged a look of pure shock. She's inside," I managed to stammer. Agent Williams nodded politely. "Thank you. And you are?" "Marcus Rodriguez. This is my wife, Sophia. Victoria is my sister." Something flickered across the agent's face. Recognition, maybe, or concern. "I see. Would it be possible for you to let Mrs. Patterson know I'm here? I have some questions regarding her recent access to federal databases." The irony was so perfect it was almost painful. Here. I was, terrified that Victoria had sicked federal investigators on me, and instead they'd come for her. Marcus found his voice first. "Of course. Should we get her husband too?" "That would be helpful, yes." As Marcus headed back toward the house, Agent Williams turned to me with a surprisingly gentle expression. "Mrs. Rodriguez, are you all right? You look upset." I wanted to laugh. Upset didn't begin to cover it. "It's been a difficult evening," he nodded slowly. "I imagine it has been. Without going into specifics, I can tell you that we take unauthorized access to federal systems very seriously. If someone has been using government resources inappropriately, especially to target family members or personal acquaintances, that's a federal crime." The validation hit me like a wave of relief so strong it almost knocked me over. "So she can't use her position to investigate people she knows personally?" "Absolutely not. That would be a clear violation of federal law and her oath of office." Agent Williams's expression hardened. Such behavior represents a serious breach of public trust. Through the front window, I could see Marcus delivering the message. Victoria's face went white as a sheet, and Derek immediately stood up from the dinner table. Mrs. Patterson looked confused, and Brandon had finally put down his phone to stare at the unfolding drama. "Agent Williams?" Victoria appeared in the doorway, trying to compose herself, but failing miserably. Her earlier confidence had evaporated completely. "What can I do for you?" "Mrs. Patterson, I need to speak with you regarding irregularities in your database access logs. We've identified several unauthorized searches that appear to be of a personal nature." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I can explain." "I'm sure you can. That's why I'm here." Agent Williams gestured toward his car. "Would you prefer to discuss this here, or would you be more comfortable coming to our office?" The color drained from Victoria's face entirely. "Here is fine. Here is perfectly fine." As they moved toward the living room, Derek appeared at my side. "Sophia, I am so sorry. I had no idea Victoria was doing any of this." Marcus emerged from the house, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's in serious trouble. Agent Williams says unauthorized database access is a felony." We could hear voices from inside, Agent Williams asking measured, professional questions, and Victoria's increasingly frantic responses. Through the window, I could see her gesticulating wildly while the agent took notes. "This is unreal," I whispered to Marcus. "An hour ago, she was threatening to destroy my life. Now she might be the one facing federal charges," Marcus finished. The conversation inside grew heated. We could hear Victoria's voice rising, then Agent Williams cutting her off with sharp, authoritative responses. Mrs. Patterson was crying now, and Brandon had retreated upstairs. 20 minutes later, Agent Williams emerged from the house alone. Victoria remained inside, presumably dealing with the aftermath of whatever he'd told her. "Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, approaching us again, "I want to assure you that any information gathered through unauthorized database searches will not be acted upon by any federal agency. Such evidence would be inadmissible and potentially illegal. "What happens to Victoria now?" Marcus asked. Agent Williams's expression was grim. "She'll likely face charges for abuse of federal authority, unauthorized access to classified systems, and possibly harassment depending on how she used the information. These are serious federal crimes with significant penalties." As if summoned by his words, Victoria appeared in the doorway again. Her earlier composure was completely gone. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her hands were shaking. "Sophia," she called out, her voice cracking. "Sophia, please, I need to talk to you." I looked at Marcus, then at Agent Williams, who nodded slightly. "What, Victoria?" I asked, not moving from Marcus's side. "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time all evening she sounded genuine. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." Agent Williams cleared his throat. "Mrs. Patterson, I'd advise you not to discuss the specifics of your case with anyone at this time." Victoria nodded frantically. Of course, I just—" "Sophia, you have to know I never filed any official reports. I never actually reported you for anything. I was just trying to scare you." The admission hung in the air like smoke. She'd terrorized me, violated my privacy, and humiliated me in front of our family, all just to scare me. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Why?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Why would you do that to me?" Victoria's face crumpled. "Because I was jealous. Because your bakery is thriving now, and everyone always talks about how proud they are of you, and I just wanted to knock you down a peg." The honesty was almost worse than the lies. She'd nearly given me a heart attack out of petty jealousy. Agent Williams stepped forward. "I think that's enough for tonight. Mrs. Patterson, you'll be hearing from our office very soon. In the meantime, your access to all federal systems has been suspended pending investigation." Victoria nodded miserably and disappeared back into the house. As Agent Williams walked back to his car, he paused and looked back at us. "Mrs. Rodriguez, if you experienced any financial losses or emotional distress as a result of Mrs. Patterson's actions, you may want to consult with an attorney about civil remedies." With that, he drove away, leaving Marcus and me standing on the porch in stunned silence. "Well," Marcus said finally, "that was the most insane family dinner in the history of family dinners." I couldn't help it. I started laughing. It was the kind of hysterical laughter that comes after extreme stress, and once I started, I couldn't stop. Marcus joined in, and soon we were both doubled over, laughing at the sheer absurdity of the evening. Victoria, who had set out to destroy me with her cruel joke, had instead destroyed herself. The federal investigator she'd pretended to have power over had actually come to investigate her. It was like something out of a dark comedy. But as our laughter died down, I realized the evening wasn't over yet. Through the living room window, I could see Victoria pacing frantically while Derek tried to calm her down. Mrs. Patterson was still crying, and Brandon was peeking down from the top of the stairs. The real consequences of Victoria's actions were just beginning to unfold, and something told me this was only the beginning of a much larger story. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As we walked back to our car, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something important. Agent Williams had appeared too quickly, too conveniently. Federal investigators don't just show up at dinner parties by coincidence. "Marcus," I said as we reached our car, "how did Agent Williams know to come tonight? How did he know Victoria was abusing her access?" Marcus stopped with his hand on the car door. "That's a really good question." We both turned back to look at the house. Through the windows, we could see the family drama continuing to unfold. But now I was wondering if there was something else going on, something we hadn't seen yet. "Maybe we should go back," I suggested. "Make sure Victoria's okay, despite everything." Marcus nodded, and we walked back toward the house. But as we approached the front door, We could hear raised voices from inside. Not just Victoria and Derek, but other voices too. Male voices. Unfamiliar ones. Through the window, I saw Victoria backing away from two men in dark suits who had apparently arrived while we were at our car. These weren't more federal investigators. They looked different, harder, more dangerous. One of them was holding what looked like photographs, spreading them out on Victoria's coffee table. Victoria was shaking her head frantically, her hands pressed to her mouth in horror. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. "Sophia, we need to call 911. But before we could move, one of the men looked up and saw us at the window. His eyes locked with mine, and in that moment, I realized that Victoria's cruel joke had unleashed something far more dangerous than federal investigators. We were all in serious danger now, and the night was far from over. My sister-in-law mocked me with a cruel joke at family dinner. Then a federal investigator walked in. Part 2. The man's cold stare froze me to the bone. For a split second, we just looked at each other through the window. Him inside Victoria's living room, me outside, in the dark. Then he said something to his partner, and they both started moving toward the front door. "Run!" Marcus whispered, grabbing my hand. "Sophia, we need to run. Now." But my feet felt like they were made of concrete. Through the window, I could see Victoria cowering behind her couch while Derek stood protectively in front of their son Brandon. Mrs. Patterson had disappeared entirely, probably hiding upstairs. The photographs scattered across the coffee table seemed to glow under the living room lights, but I couldn't make out what they showed from this distance. The front door burst open, and the two men stepped onto the porch. Up close, they looked even more intimidating. The first one was tall and lean with graying hair and scars on his knuckles. The second was younger but built like a linebacker, with dead eyes that seemed to look right through you. "You folks need to come inside," the older one said. His voice was calm, almost polite, which somehow made it more terrifying. "We're having a family discussion." "We don't live here," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear I could feel radiating from him. "We were just leaving." The younger man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, that's not happening. See, your sister-in-law here has been very busy, very careless, and now we all need to have a conversation about what she's seen and who she's talked to." My mind raced. What had Victoria seen? Was this connected to her federal consulting work, or something else entirely? "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "We don't know anything about Victoria's work. We just came for dinner." The older man studied me with those calculating eyes. "Sophia Rodriguez, right? You own Rodriguez Bakery on Maple Street?" The fact that he knew my name and my business made my blood run cold. "How do you know that?" "We know a lot of things," he replied. "We know about your little tax situation. We know about the cash payments to your employee. We even know about the federal investigation that's probably going to destroy your business." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. These men knew everything Victoria had discovered about me. But how? And why did they care? "Who are you?" Marcus demanded. The younger man flashed a badge, not like Agent Williams's official federal ID, but something that looked foreign. The lettering was too small to read in the dim porch light. "We're consultants," the older man said smoothly. "International security consultants. And your sister-in-law has stumbled into something way above her pay grade." He gestured toward the door. "Inside. Now. Or this gets much worse for everyone." We had no choice. Marcus and I followed them back into Victoria's living room, where the scene was even more chaotic than I'd imagined. Victoria was sitting on the couch now, her face buried in her hands. Derek stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder, while Brandon huddled in the corner looking terrified. The photographs on the coffee table made my breath catch. They weren't financial records or tax documents. They were surveillance photos, Grainy black and white images of people entering and leaving buildings, getting into cars, meeting in parking lots. In several of them, I could make out Victoria's face clearly. "Your wife," the older man said to Derek, "has been using her federal database access for more than just harassing family members." Derek's face went white. "What are you talking about?" 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Patterson ran background checks on 17 individuals connected to an ongoing international investigation. Individuals who are very interested in keeping their identities private. Victoria finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I didn't know. I was just doing research for my consulting contract. They gave me a list of names to investigate." The younger man leaned forward menacingly. "What consulting contract? Who gave you the list?" "It was..." Victoria's voice broke. "It was supposed to be legitimate. A company called Meridian Security Solutions. They said they needed background checks on potential employees for a government contract." The two men exchanged a look that sent chills down my spine. "Meridian Security Solutions doesn't exist," the older man said quietly. "It's a front company. Someone used you to access classified federal databases, and now those people know we've been watching them." The pieces started falling into place. In my mind. Victoria hadn't just been abusing her federal access to investigate me. She'd been manipulated into compromising an entire investigation by running background checks for criminals posing as a legitimate company. "So, the federal contract Victoria mentioned at dinner?" Marcus began. "Doesn't exist," the older man confirmed. "She's been working for the wrong side without knowing it." Victoria let out a sob. "But I got paid. They wired money to my account." "Dirty money," the younger man said harshly. "Money from people who traffic drugs, weapons, and worse across international borders. Money that's now sitting in your bank account with your name on it." The room spun around me. This was so much worse than Victoria's petty jealousy and cruel jokes. She'd accidentally become part of an international criminal conspiracy. "What do you want from us?" Derek asked, his voice barely a whisper. The older man pulled out a tablet and showed us the screen. It displayed what looked like financial records: bank transfers, wire transactions, cryptocurrency exchanges. Victoria's name appeared on several of them. "Your wife has received over $200,000 from known criminal organizations over the past month," he said. "In the eyes of the law, she's now an active participant in money laundering and international conspiracy." Victoria's sobs turned into hyperventilation. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "We believe you," the older man said, surprisingly gently. "But believing you and proving it are two different things. The people you've been working for don't leave loose ends." As if to emphasize his point, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression darkened. "They know we're here," he said to his partner. "We need to move. Now." "What's happening?" I asked, fear making my voice high and tight. "The people your sister-in-law has been helping just realized they've been exposed. They're cleaning house, which means eliminating anyone who can connect them to their operation." The younger man was already moving toward the back of the house, checking windows and exits. "How many ways out of this neighborhood?" "Just the main road," Derek said. "This is a cul-de-sac." "Perfect," the older man muttered sarcastically. "They'll have it blocked already." Through the front window, I could see headlights turning onto Victoria's street. Multiple cars moving slowly and deliberately. "Everyone upstairs," the older man ordered. "Away from the windows." We all hurried up to the second floor, crowding into Brandon's bedroom at the back of the house. The older man peered through the blinds while his partner made a phone call in rapid, hushed tones. 4 cars, he reported. "Professional setup. They're surrounding the house." Victoria was rocking back and forth on Brandon's bed, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over again. Derek sat beside her, trying to comfort her while clearly terrified himself. Brandon had gone completely silent, staring at his phone screen without really seeing it. Marcus grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. How did our family dinner turn into this? I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but I was too scared. We'd gone from Victoria's cruel jokes about tax fraud to being trapped in a house surrounded by international criminals. The evening had taken turns I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. The younger man finished his phone call and rejoined us. Backup is 20 minutes out. We need to hold position until then. 20 minutes? Derek's voice cracked. What are they going to do to us? The older man's expression was grim. Nothing, if we're lucky. But these people don't take chances. They know Victoria accessed information about their operation, and they know we're federal agents. My heart stopped. You're federal agents? DEA, he confirmed. We've been tracking this organization for 3 years. Your sister-in-law's database searches triggered alerts in our system, which is how we knew to come here tonight. But Agent Williams was already here, Marcus said, from the Inspector General's office. The younger man nodded. We coordinate with multiple agencies. Williams handles the administrative violations, unauthorized database access, abuse of federal authority. We handle the criminal conspiracy part. A sound from downstairs made us all freeze. The front door was being tested. Someone was checking. If it was locked? They're coming in, the older man whispered. He pulled out his gun, and his partner did the same. Everyone stay down and stay quiet. We heard the distinctive sound of the front door being forced open, followed by footsteps moving through the house. Multiple sets of footsteps, moving systematically, from room to room. Victoria's breathing was so loud I was afraid they'd hear her from downstairs. Derek put his arm around her shoulders and whispered for her to calm down, but she was beyond hearing him. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. We know you're up there, a voice called. The accent was slight but noticeable. Eastern European, maybe Russian. We just want to talk. The older DEA agent caught my eye and shook his head slightly. Don't believe them, his expression said. Mrs. Patterson, the voice continued, you have something that belongs to us. Information that you accessed inappropriately. We need that information back. Victoria looked up with desperate hope in her eyes, as if she thought she could actually negotiate with these people. The older agent put his finger to his lips, warning her to stay silent. We know about the federal agents, too, the voice said. Closer now. They were climbing the stairs. This doesn't have to end badly for anyone. We just need to make sure everyone understands the importance of discretion. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. We could hear them moving down the hallway, checking rooms. They'd reach Brandon's room in less than a minute. The older DEA agent looked at his watch, then at his partner. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. The younger agent moved to the bedroom door and took position beside it. Mrs. Patterson, the voice called again. Right outside the door now. We're going to count to 3. Then we're coming in and this conversation gets much more difficult. 1. The older agent raised his gun toward the door. 2. Brandon whimpered, and Derek pulled him closer. 3. The door exploded inward. But instead of criminals entering the room, I heard the sound of breaking glass from downstairs, followed by shouts and what sounded like a small explosion. Federal agents! Everyone on the ground! The backup had arrived, but they'd come through the windows instead of the front door. Suddenly, the house was full of voices shouting commands, people running, and what sounded like a brief struggle. Within minutes, it was over. The older DEA agent lowered his weapon and smiled for the first time all evening. Show's over, folks. The cavalry has arrived. We could hear people being arrested downstairs, handcuffs clicking, rights being read, car doors slamming outside. Through Brandon's window, I could see red and blue lights flashing all over the quiet suburban street. Is it really over? Victoria asked in a small voice. The older agent holstered his gun. The immediate danger is over, but Mrs. Patterson, you're going to be answering questions for a very long time. What you stumbled into is much bigger than you realize. As we made our way downstairs, I could see the aftermath of the raid. Victoria's pristine living room was a disaster zone. Overturned furniture, broken glass, and evidence markers everywhere. Several men in dark clothing were being led away in handcuffs, including the one who'd threatened us upstairs. Agent Williams was waiting in the kitchen, looking much more serious than he had earlier in the evening. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Rodriguez," he said. "I apologize for the deception earlier. We needed to maintain our cover while our DEA colleagues positioned themselves." "So you knew this was going to happen?" Marcus asked. "We suspected Mrs. Patterson had been compromised, yes, but we didn't know how deep it went until tonight." Victoria appeared at my elbow, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Sophia, I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. The things I said at dinner, the way I treated you, were horrible," I finished for her. "But they probably saved all our lives." She looked confused. "If you hadn't been so obvious about your database access tonight, Agent Williams wouldn't have come when he did. And if he hadn't been here to witness what was happening, the DEA might not have realized we were all in immediate danger." It was true. Victoria's cruel joke had triggered a chain of events that exposed a major criminal conspiracy and probably prevented something much worse from happening to all of us. "The irony," Marcus said quietly, "is that Victoria's worst moment might have been the thing that saved us all." But as I looked around at the chaos in Victoria's house, at the federal agents processing evidence and taking statements, I realized our ordeal was far from over. Victoria was still facing federal charges for her database abuse. She was still implicated in a money laundering scheme. And somewhere out there, the people behind this operation were probably planning their next move. The night that started with family dinner and cruel jokes had become something much more dangerous, and I had a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. My sister-in-law mocked me with a cruel joke at family dinner. Then a federal investigator walked in. Part 3. 3 days later, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the Federal building downtown, staring at photographs that made my stomach turn. The images spread across the table weren't the surveillance photos we'd seen at Victoria's house. These were much worse. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Agent Williams said gently, "I know this is difficult, but we need you to understand the full scope of what your sister-in-law uncovered." Across from me, Victoria sat hunched over with her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been explaining federal conspiracy laws for the past hour. Victoria looked like she hadn't slept since the night of the raid. Dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed, hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The photographs showed shipping containers, warehouses, and what looked like underground tunnels. But it was the people in the images that made my blood run cold. Some were clearly victims, young women and children with terror in their eyes. Others were the perpetrators, men in expensive suits standing next to trucks full of contraband. "The organization that recruited your sister-in-law," the lead DEA agent explained, "is one of the largest human trafficking rings on the East Coast. They move people, drugs, and weapons through a network that spans from Eastern Europe to major American cities." Victoria let out a choked sob. "I helped them do this. Oh God, I helped them hurt these people." Her lawyer put a steadying hand on her arm. "Victoria, you were manipulated. You're as much a victim here as anyone else." Agent Williams leaned forward. "That's partially true, but the law doesn't always recognize good intentions when national security is involved." Marcus, who'd been silent beside me, finally spoke up. "What exactly are you saying? What's going to happen to Victoria?" "That depends," Agent Williams replied, "on how much she cooperates with our ongoing investigation." He pulled out another file, this one thicker than the others. The database searches Mrs. Patterson conducted revealed the identities of 17 undercover federal agents working this case. 5 of them had to be pulled from their assignments immediately. 2 are in witness protection. 1— He paused, his expression growing dark. One was found dead in Baltimore yesterday morning. The room went completely silent. Victoria's face went white as paper, and Derek, who'd been standing by the window, sank into a chair like his legs had given out. "You're saying Victoria's database searches got a federal agent killed?" I whispered. "We're saying her database searches compromised operational security in a way that may have contributed to Agent Martinez's death." "Yes." Victoria made a sound, like a wounded animal. No, no, no. This can't be happening. I was just trying to do my job. I was just trying to help. Patricia Chen cleared her throat. "Agent Williams, are you formally charging my client in connection with Agent Martinez's death?" "Not yet," he replied, "but the Justice Department is reviewing all options." Marcus stood up abruptly. "This is insane. Victoria made mistakes, yes, but she was duped by criminals. How is she responsible for what they did with the information?" The DEA agent who'd protected us at Victoria's house, Agent Morrison, spoke for the first time since we'd arrived. "Because federal database access comes with responsibility. When you have security clearance, you're trusted with information. That can literally mean life or death for other people." He gestured to the photographs on the table. Every name Mrs. Patterson looked up, every file she accessed, every search she ran, it all gets logged. The criminals who hired her knew this. They used her legitimate access to gather intelligence on our operations. "But she didn't know," Derek protested. "Ignorance isn't a defense when it comes to national security," Agent Morrison replied firmly. "If it were, every spy and traitor would claim they didn't understand what they were doing." Victoria looked up with desperate eyes. "What can I do? How can I make this right?" Agent Williams and Agent Morrison exchanged a look. Then Williams pulled out a tablet and set it in front of Victoria. "The organization that used you is still active. We arrested the cleanup crew at your house, but they were just soldiers. The people running this operation are still out there, and they're planning something big." On the tablet screen was a map of the city with several locations marked in red. "We believe they're planning to move a significant shipment of victims through the port next week, but we don't know exactly when or where." Victoria stared at the screen. "How would I know that?" "Because," Agent Morrison said, "they haven't cut contact with you yet. We've been monitoring your communications since the raid. They're still sending you requests for database searches." He showed us Victoria's phone, which had been confiscated as evidence. The screen displayed several unread messages from different numbers, all asking for background checks on various names. "They don't know we're on to them," Agent Williams explained. "As far as they know, you're still their asset inside the federal system." Patricia Chen leaned forward. "Are you asking my client to work as an informant?" "We're offering her the chance to help us save lives," Agent Morrison said, "and possibly reduce her own legal exposure in the process." Victoria looked around the room, at her lawyer, at Derek, at Marcus and me. "What would I have to do?" Agent Williams pulled up another screen on the tablet. "Continue responding to their requests, but give us everything first. Let us feed you the information to send back. Help us track their communications and identify their leadership." "That sounds incredibly dangerous," Derek said. "It is dangerous," Agent Morrison admitted. "But it's also Victoria's best chance to make things right and avoid spending the next 20 years in federal prison." The weight of the decision hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her lawyer's pen when Patricia handed it to her. "If I do this," Victoria said quietly, "what happens to my family? What about Derek and Brandon?" "We'll provide protection," Agent Williams assured her. "New identities if necessary, relocation assistance, full witness protection protocols." "And if I don't?" Agent Morrison's expression was grim. "Then you'll be charged as a co-conspirator in Agent Martinez's death, money laundering, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, and about a dozen other federal crimes. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison." Victoria closed her eyes and took a shuddering breath. When she opened them again, something had changed. The scared, desperate woman was still there, but underneath I could see a flicker of the old Victoria, the determined, stubborn woman who'd built a successful consulting business from nothing. What do I need to do? Over the next hour, the agents explained the operation in detail. Victoria would continue her normal routine, but everything would be monitored and controlled. Her database searches would be conducted under supervision, with agents feeding her specific information to pass along. Her communications would be recorded and analyzed. The goal, Agent Williams explained, is to identify the shipping route and timing for their next major operation. If we can intercept that shipment, we can save dozens of victims and potentially take down the entire network. And if something goes wrong? Derek asked. Agent Morrison didn't sugarcoat it. Then Victoria and all of you could end up like Agent Martinez. The reality of what we were discussing hit me like a physical blow. 3 days ago, my biggest worry was whether Victoria's tax fraud threats would destroy my bakery. Now we were talking about human trafficking, dead federal agents, and witness protection. I need to make a call, Victoria said suddenly. Her lawyer looked concerned. Victoria, we should discuss. I need to call my mother-in-law, Victoria interrupted. Mrs. Patterson has been staying with her sister since the raid. She doesn't know what's really happening, and if we're going into witness protection, Agent. Williams nodded. We can arrange for you to speak with her. But understand that once we begin this operation, all communication with family and friends will be monitored and potentially restricted. Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. As the agents prepared the paperwork for Victoria's cooperation agreement, I found myself thinking about the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. It had started with Victoria's jealousy and cruelty, her need to humiliate me over a minor tax issue. But that cruelty had accidentally exposed a criminal conspiracy that reached far beyond our family drama. Sophia, Victoria said quietly, pulling me aside while the lawyers and agents huddled over documents. I need you to know something. I waited. The things I said at dinner, the way I threatened you, it wasn't just about jealousy. I was angry. At myself. My consulting business was failing. The federal contract was the only thing keeping me afloat financially. She took a shaky breath. When I realized the contract was fake, that I'd been working for criminals, I felt so stupid. So when I saw you and Marcus that night, happy and successful despite your struggles, I snapped. I wanted someone else to feel as scared and helpless as I did. It was the most honest thing Victoria had ever said to me, and despite everything she'd put me through, I found myself feeling sorry for her. Victoria, I said, what you did was terrible, but you're doing the right thing now. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I hope it's enough to make up for what I've done. I hope Agent Martinez's family can forgive me someday. 2 hours later, the cooperation agreement was signed. Victoria was officially a federal informant, working to bring down the organization that had used her. Derek and Brandon would be placed in protective custody until the operation was complete. As we prepared to leave the federal building, Agent Williams pulled Marcus and me aside. I need you both to understand that this isn't over for you either, he said. You were witnesses to what happened at Mrs. Patterson's house. You saw the photographs, heard the conversations. The defense attorneys are going to want to interview you extensively. Are we in danger? Marcus asked. We don't think so, but we're not taking chances. You'll have periodic check-ins with our office, and we'll be monitoring for any threats against you. He handed us each a business card with multiple phone numbers. If anything unusual happens, strange phone calls, people asking questions about Victoria, anyone following you, call immediately. As we walked to our car, I felt like I was living in someone else's life. The quiet suburban evening, the families, walking their dogs, the children playing in front yards. It all seemed surreal after what we'd just been through. Do you think she'll be okay? I asked Marcus as we drove home. Victoria? I honestly don't know. But I think she's finally doing something brave instead of something cruel. We drove in silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a car parked across the street that I didn't recognize. My heart started racing until I saw Agent Morrison get out and wave at us. Federal protection was already in place. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about how quickly everything can change. A week ago, Victoria was just my difficult sister-in-law with a mean streak. Now she was risking her life to help federal agents save trafficking victims and bring down international criminals. Marcus rolled over and put his arm around me. "Are you okay?" "I keep thinking about those photographs," I admitted. "Those women. And children. They're somebody's daughters, somebody's sisters. Victoria's going to help save them," Marcus said softly. "Whatever else she's done, she's going to help save them." I hoped he was right. I hoped Victoria's cooperation would be enough to stop the next shipment, to rescue those victims, to bring the criminals to justice. I hoped Agent Martinez's death wouldn't be in vain, but mostly, I hoped we'd all survive whatever came next. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Agent Williams. The operation had been a success. Victoria's intelligence had helped them intercept a shipping container at the port with 37 trafficking victims inside. The rescue had led to the arrest of 12 high-ranking members of the criminal organization, including the man who'd ordered Agent Martinez's death. Victoria's charges were reduced to misdemeanor abuse of federal authority. She received 2 years, probation and permanent loss of her security clearance. Derek and Brandon came out of protective custody, and the family was slowly trying to rebuild their lives. "And the victims?" I asked Agent Williams. "Safe," he said, "being cared for by social services and victim advocacy groups. Because of your sister-in-law's cooperation, 37 people are free who might have spent years in slavery." After I hung up, I sat in my bakery kitchen thinking about the strange way justice sometimes works. Victoria's cruelest moment had triggered a chain of events that saved dozens of lives. Her jealousy and meanness had accidentally exposed one of the largest criminal conspiracies in the region. It didn't excuse what she'd done to me that night at dinner. It didn't erase the fear and humiliation she'd put me through, but it did prove that even our worst mistakes can sometimes lead to something meaningful, something important, something that matters more than our own small dramas. 6 months later, Victoria and Derek moved to Arizona for a fresh start. Before they left, Victoria came to see me one last time. "I wanted to thank you," she said, standing awkwardly in my bakery's front entrance. "For what? For not hating me, for understanding that I was scared and stupid, not evil." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. She looked smaller somehow, humbled by everything that had happened. But there was something else there too, something that hadn't been there before. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of the anger that had driven her for so long. "Everyone deserves a second chance," I told her. "Even sister-in-laws who make terrible jokes at family dinners." She laughed, and for the first time since I'd known her, it sounded genuine. "Take care of yourself, Sophia, and thank you for helping me find a way to do something right." After she left, I realized that the evening that had started with such cruelty and fear had taught me something important about forgiveness, about family, and about the unexpected ways our lives intersect with larger stories of justice and redemption. Victoria's cruel joke had nearly destroyed our family, but in the end, it had saved dozens of strangers and brought down a criminal empire. Sometimes the worst nights of our lives turn out to be the most important ones, and sometimes federal investigators really do show up at the exact right moment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.